CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Moving to a green economy will not be cheap, and developing countries will need help. A major UN World Investment Report.
Our other headlines: Europe looks to loosen restrictions on genetically modified food, saying new technology could produce more resilient crops needing less pesticide.
At least 15 people dead as flooding hits China, and there's no sign of a let-up in the weather.
And after oil, what next? OPEC Plus countries meet in Vienna to talk sustainability and energy transition. Support is urgently needed for developing countries if they're going to attract the major investment they need to move to clean energy. That's according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development.
The World Investment Report 2023 shows an enormous investment gap, preventing developing countries from moving to clean energy at anywhere near the pace needed. It says as much as $2.2 trillion in extra annual investment is needed because financing has been concentrated in developed countries, and that looks unlikely to change anytime soon. Total global foreign direct investment fell by 12% in 2022 after crises like the war in Ukraine restricted the flow of money, with the UN expecting downward pressure to continue in 2023. Amelia Santos Paulino is the co-author of the report, and I asked her about its findings.
There are major disparities when it comes in global investment patterns between developed and developing countries. We are in a situation where global foreign direct investment were affected because of the multiple crises, but also SDG, the gap of the investment needs to meet the Sustainable Development Goals increased from 2.5 trillion in 2015 to over 4 trillion now. So basically, there are major drivers of this. One is that investment is largely concentrated, in developed economies and in the larger developing and emerging markets. So foreign direct investment, international investment flows is largely bypassing the poorest and the more vulnerable economies like the least developed countries.
So why do you think that's, given that they are perhaps the ones that need the investment most?
Well, this is due to a multitude of factors. One is the increased needs, and the other is the new needs, but also the capacities for countries to prepare bankable projects, to attract investment due to different issues related to the economic environment, to the regulatory environment, to institutional factors, to the environment in general. So countries need support not only in attracting investment per se, but also to have the right environment for business to thrive and for investment to come into the countries.
So we have seen an overall drop in foreign direct investment. Do you think things will improve from here on in?
You're right. We show in the report that the prospects for international investment were particularly gloomy last year because of rising inflation, because of the global turbulence, the fears of a recession. All that affected investor sentiment and investors' decision and had an impact on foreign direct investment. But this decline was limited to financial activities between corporations, between multinational enterprises, what we measure through mergers and acquisitions data. But on the other side, we saw an increase in project announcement, especially in large developing and large emerging economies.
So some investment coming in then. What else can be done, do you think, to try and boost global sustainable development?
Well, an important message of the report is partnership, especially because in developing countries, bringing in investors, the cost of investment is high, especially in the renewable sector, which is characterized by a very high upfront investment. So partnerships are important, and we show how much the cost of debt and equity is reduced for investment in renewable energy when you bring in investors. But not only that, also partnerships that bring in multilateral actors, multilateral development banks, where governments are involved as well. And a very important factor here is the planning process of countries. We show in the report that over 147 countries have presented national determined contributions to the COP process, but only 40 have clear investment needs and also have identified how the needs are going to be financed. In the report, we propose a global action compact to respond to the challenges of international investment in the transition. And this compact contains guiding principles, basically with three objectives in mind. One is the energy transition, the other is ensuring energy security, and the other is how to help international policy making, both national and international investment in the form of the reform and modernization of international investment agreement. And above all, partnerships, global and in particular South-South partnership is very important to realize this compact.
Business activity in the Eurozone contracted last month with the downturn in the EU's service sector as well as factory output. PMI data, which is seen as a gauge of overall economic health, slumped to 49.9 in June. That's down from nearly 53 in May. Anything below 50 marks a contraction. This is the first since December.
China is preparing to increase export controls on metals used to make semiconductors, according to an influential trade policy advisor to the Beijing government. Shares in some Chinese metals companies rallied for a second day after Beijing said it would place controls on germanium and gallium in a high-tech trade dispute with the United States. News of export controls comes as US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is en route to Beijing for talks.
Lamborghini's traditional combustion engine models have sold out until the end of production, according to the CEO in an interview with a German newspaper. This comes as the luxury car maker moves towards its hybrid lineup. Lamborghini will be investing at least $2 billion in hybrid models by 2024, with more money earmarked to develop its fully electric model by the end of this decade.
Toyota says it has made a breakthrough in the way electric car batteries are produced. The company says it's simplified the process, allowing it to halve the weight, size and cost of batteries. The new discovery could also cut the amount of time it takes to recharge a battery and increase the driving range.
The Chinese tech giant BYD has announced plans to set up shop in Brazil, building a plant to manufacture its electric vehicles there.
Our correspondent Paulo Cabral travelled to the city of Salvador.
It was a joyful and colorful Bahia-style celebration with much music and dance to officially announce Chinese tech company BYD's intention to invest $620 million in the Brazilian state to set up a plant to make its electric vehicles. Sources at BYD confirmed to CGTN America that they will take over this former Ford plant in the city of Camaçari, which was decommissioned when the American automaker shut down its operations in Brazil in 2021, even if on the record, BYD executives have not yet confirmed the involvement of that structure.
In a few days, we'll make a very transparent announcement about this, so we will be able to say exactly where our facility will be. This is a deal involving two private companies, BYD and Ford.
BYD is already selling in Brazil electric vehicles imported from its plants in China. But the Chinese company has ambitious plans to expand in the country with large-scale production of EVs in its future plant here in the state of Bahia.
Brazil is super important for us. As you see, we build up a car manufacturing in Brazil. It's the second car manufacturer outside China. So we build the facility here. We call this manufacturing hub. It's not only support the market here, but also support the market around Brazil in Latin country.
Last week, BYD launched its entry-level electric car in Brazil, the BYD Dolphin, priced at around $30,000. The second cheapest EV in the country. According to the company, about 1,000 of them have been sold in the first 4 days in the market. There are no details yet as to exactly what vehicles will be produced in Brazil, but officials aim to get the plant up and running by the second half of next year. The Bahia state governor is touting the new jobs BYD has promised to create, up to 5,000 in the next few years, and he's excited about the longer-term benefits to his state brought by transfer of technology.
Nós queremos ser consumidor qualificado.
We want to be qualified consumers. Brazil and the state of Bahia want to be partners in production, science generation, technology and innovation.
In 2021, another big Chinese automaker, Great Wall Motors, also announced a plant in Brazil, using the former facilities of Mercedes-Benz and the countryside of São Paulo state. If the BYD-Ford deal is confirmed, it will mark the second recent case of a Chinese electric vehicle company replacing a Western car maker, producing traditional fossil fuel vehicles in Brazil. Paulo Cabral, CGTN, Salvador.
Officials in US President Joe Biden's administration have been restricted from contacting social media companies about moderating their content after a ruling by a federal judge. This all comes after Republicans allege the government went too far in trying to control online posts related to vaccines during the pandemic. Let's talk to our correspondent John Terrett in New York. John, so Biden told to keep clear of social media.
Yes, hello. Yeah, got to be very careful going forward. You know the bigger story, though, Jamie? It is that there was somebody working in the federal court system on July the 4th, major public holiday yesterday, and yet an injunction was issued against the Biden administration, which means they have to be very careful about how and if at all they approach social media companies at the moment. And the thing is that this is a case that is likely to go with the plaintiffs now. At least that's the theory, because the judge has put this injunction in place. That means he's minded to go with the people who are making the complaint, which is that the Biden administration just simply got too close to the social media companies at the height of COVID-19, trying to get them to moderate the language used when it came to health issues surrounding COVID-19. Now, this is a free speech issue. And you know there's nothing more important to Americans than the First Amendment of the Constitution, which guarantees them free speech. I've told you on this program before, Americans can pretty much say anything they like as long as they don't shout fire in a crowded theater. And that is one of the reasons why the libel laws that are so strict, particularly in the UK where you are, it's very difficult to impose them here in this society. So the language of this case, which has been brought by some conservative attorneys general, is really quite conspiratorial. It alleges there was a conspiracy between the Biden administration and the social media companies to limit or restrict or to mold the language that was put onto the social media sites at the time regarding vaccines and regarding COVID-19. It is very much a conservative case, Jamie, and although we've had the injunction, which means the administration will have to be careful, as I've said, we won't get the ruling, I suspect, for some time, but the injunction is a big clue to the judge's thinking. Jamie?
John, no edition of this programme would be complete without a mention of Twitter. Now, Mark Zuckerberg enters stage right, targeting Twitter.
I know. Well, it's really funny, isn't it, because we've got this cage fight in Las Vegas, which is still pending between Elon Musk of Twitter and Mark Zuckerberg of Meta Platforms. Apparently, it's still potentially on. And now we have a corporate dust-up between the two companies that those men represent, because we are told that Zuckerberg is about to introduce something called Threads. Now, I'm wearing some pretty natty threads myself today, but not these kind of threads, nothing to do with fashion. This is going after Twitter in its territory quite directly, and I'm told the announcement will come tomorrow, Thursday, so we'll see. Now, the point is, Mark Zuckerberg has a track record of doing this, taking somebody else's idea and making it better. Look at Instagram, which we trendies here in New York refer to as Insta, or WhatsApp, or Reels. I mean, for goodness sake, I can't go onto my Facebook page anymore without being bombarded by Facebook Reels, which is tiny little films of varying interests. I won't reveal what they are. And it's supposed to go after TikTok, you see. So Zuckerberg's doing this. And of course, he has the knowledge and he has the cash. And I think, to be fair, Twitter is always going to be the dominant way of disseminating information now. I mean, we do have Mastodon, but I mean, nobody toots, do they? I mean, I know it has thousands of, I know all that. But really, nobody says, for example, hey, why don't we Google why don't we Google each other? Or why don't we Microsoft Teams each other? No. They say, why don't we Zoom? I'll Zoom you at 12:45. So Zoom has become a buzzword for those kind of video interactions in the way that Twitter has become a buzzword and a go-to place for disseminating information. So I think Zuckerberg has a fight on his hands, to be fair, but it comes, of course, just as Twitter is having real difficulty making money. Advertisers are apparently pulling out. Elon Musk admits they're having trouble making money, and just this week they've announced that they're going to put TweetDeck, that amazing thing, which is like a drug, you know, where you put all the tweets that you love on one page and they're all coming in one after another, like one of the old news wires. Well, that's going behind a paywall. And there's no guarantee that anybody will pay for it, you see. So I think Zuckerberg has a chance, but I do also think that Twitter will be dominant. I may be wrong. Meta shares up 3% right now.
John, that cage fight is obviously one of your highlights of the coming week. What else should we look out for?
Oh, we're doing the other. I thought we were doing the third question. Yes, well, indeed. The cage fight, I'm desperately looking forward to it, of course. And the story of the week really is that we have the Federal Reserve minutes in about 1 hour 45. Now, these are the minutes from the last Federal Reserve FOMC committee meeting. It will tell us what members of that committee were thinking about interest rates and inflation when they met 2 weeks ago. On Friday, we'll get the jobs report, another key indicator of inflation and what might happen about interest rates. The Federal Reserve meets on July the 25th and 26th, and I'm now going to turn around and reveal my very attractive right side to you. And to tell you, the Dow is actually at the moment down 100 points and the S&P 500 is down by 7 points. So a negative lunchtime here on the floor.
John, it's your best side. Good to see you. See you tomorrow. Our correspondent, John Terrace, in New York.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. European lawmakers take another look at genetically modified crops, looking to lift restrictions in the light of new gene editing techniques.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. The European Commission is contemplating revising its rules on genetically modified organisms. It's considering loosening some restrictions, a move they say would allow more resilient crops and reduce the use of pesticides, as well as offer consumers food with higher nutritional value. Well, let's talk to Agnès Ricroc, who's Secretary of the Life Sciences at the Academy of Agriculture of France. Welcome to the programme. Well, first of all, I mean, your reaction, and I guess the wider reaction of the scientific community to the EU having a look at this again, reviewing its policy. What do you make of it?
Okay, thank you for inviting me. Good afternoon or good morning. I think scientists and breeders welcome the new proposal for the new genomic techniques to increase yields of major crops for resilient crops because we are facing the effect of climate change, the post-COVID-19 pandemic, and now the Russia war against Ukraine. So we know that in Europe we have external dependencies. So we need food security, and the new genomic techniques can speed up the breeding with a high precision. So the new document released by the European Commission distinguished conventional-like plants made with CRISPR-Cas9, is new genomic techniques, from the traditional transgenic crops.
OK, well, you will know that there are many critics and people unhappy with this who do not support it. They would call this Frankenstein food. Is that fair? Is their worry fair?
No, I don't think so, because with a high precision of breeding with these new genomic techniques, we can precisely make a change for new trait in a genome. So we know exactly what we do, and it's not Frankenstein products. It could be made by public laboratories and by small and medium-sized enterprises, because these new genomic techniques, if they are not classified as GMOs, they don't need, a costly risk assessment, but a traditional risk assessment.
Talk us through this time scale here. What kind of time are we talking about? How many years before we see these crops planted in fields in European farms?
Okay. This document released by the European Commission should be analyzed by the Council and by the Parliament, and perhaps in 2 or 3 years, perhaps in 2026, this document will be voted. So then these new crops could be on the market. At the moment, researchers and breeders, they are working in the lab. There is no field trials. It's forbidden at the moment because we have no clear legislation. But they are preparing the new crops. So perhaps in the next 10 years, we will see some marketed products made by the European breeders. OK,
thank you very much indeed. I'm sure we'll talk about this again in the coming years. For the moment, Agnès Ricroc in Paris, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much.
The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog has been visiting the Fukushima nuclear power plant and speaking to people living nearby, the day after giving the green light to a controversial plan to discharge contaminated water into the ocean. The plant was damaged by an earthquake and tsunami in 2011. Rafael Grossi has been seeking to reassure people that Tokyo's discharge plans are safe. Our correspondent Jack Barton reports.
The Director General of the UN's nuclear agency, Rafael Grossi, meeting with officials, fishermen and locals in Fukushima, having already given the green light for the release of contaminated water from the Daiichi nuclear power plant. The head of the local fishing association told Grossi his group remains opposed to the plan. Grossi responded that he did not have a magic wand to dispel doubts, but that the UN agency is committed to the scheme.
We are going to stay here. We are going to stay here with you for decades to come, until the last drop of the water which is accumulated around the reactor has been safely discharged.
The mayor of Iwaki town, where the meeting was held, told Japanese officials the priority should now be transparency and information, not a rush to release the water. The Japanese government is yet to announce when it will begin releasing the contaminated water into the Pacific Ocean. Some people here were reassured by Grossi's face-to-face with locals.
Many things have happened prior to this meeting, and my opinion is that many of the local people are calmly accepting this.
But others say the plan represents a setback to a region just getting back on its feet.
They started to rebuild, and they are quite comfortably recovered after the disaster, and now that all the wastewater goes into the ocean, that would affect the people, and I don't really feel safe at all.
After the meeting, Grossi visited the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. It is here that the IAEA is setting up its permanent monitoring team to oversee the discharge of the water.
By and large, I think that all the basic elements are in place in case the government takes a decision to move forward with this.
After Japan, Grossi heads to countries including South Korea and the Pacific Islands, where there are lingering concerns over the release. Jack Barton, CGTN, Fukushima.
Italy has launched a series of roadshows in China to try and recruit more tourists. It's the first promotional event of its kind in 3 years following the pandemic. It's intended to boost cooperation between the two countries' tourism sectors and improve services for Chinese visitors. Kicking off at Italy's embassy in Beijing, the roadshow will also tour Shanghai, Guangzhou and Chongqing.
The roadshow events aim to send a clear signal to the Chinese people that Italy is exerting every effort to make itself a major tourist destination for Chinese travelers. We hope that the number of Chinese tourists traveling to Italy can reach and surpass the level in 2019, when Italy was the most popular choice, and we received nearly 5.4 million visits by Chinese tourists.
In terms of bilateral historical relations, traditional friendship, and mutual affection between the two peoples, the Chinese market is very important for us. And of course, if we take a look at the scale and numbers, the Chinese market is huge in size and has great potential for growth. It is a strategic source of tourists for us. I will be attending all 4 roadshow events. Italy is ready to welcome you. Our cities are ready to welcome you, to make your trip special and memorable.
The gaming industry has long made use of the latest technology like virtual and augmented reality.
Now, artificial intelligence could help gamers go one step further, allowing them to create their own characters and even their own games in just a matter of a few seconds.
Our correspondent Mark New reports.
It may look like I'm aimlessly staring at a wall, but inside my augmented reality headsets, I'm meeting an owl.
I haven't seen you around here before. Welcome to the Redwood Forest. My name is Wall, and I'm a northern sawwood owl who has lived here my whole life. May I ask what your name is?
My name is Mark.
Nice to meet you, Mark. I don't meet a lot of humans, but I do listen in on their conversations sometimes.
The gaming company Niantic has teamed up with Liquid City to use generative AI to form Wall's personality. Wise guy?
I've been called many things, but that's a new one. I prefer the term quick-witted or eccentric. But hey, if the shoe fits.
You get to actually direct the conversation, and Wall is more like a partner. I guess we're really interested in this possibility for a future where it's not just Wall, but there are many AI agents that could be everywhere, and they could be your partners in learning and playing and doing many different things.
Allowing a user to fill a game with lifelike characters is the goal of in-world AI.
That's a very human interpretation of the idea.
You literally just write who this person is. You can talk about core motivations they have. If you want, you can add flaws and insecurities.
In-World AI's partnerships manager shows me how I can type in my character's interests and hobbies and then fine-tune their personality.
So these characters have emotions, they have personalities, memories, and backgrounds that you can give to them. But this is going to influence the way they speak to you, the words they choose, the inflection of their voice.
And what can artificial intelligence do for game generation? Well, I'm here with the game Oxworld, where the idea is to dream up a scenario. So let me input this. How about, let me dream ocean with cars as sea life. In seconds, AI generates my game.
Yeah, there is the ocean.
In private testing right now, Oxworld is a multiplayer online game that is ever-changing.
It will try to understand your intention. So the intent engine basically tries to create a new formula out of your thoughts.
The more times a similar idea is entered, the smarter the AI engine gets at understanding and building a game.
The initial development of a video game informs what its future is. So we've broken that down and we've said, no, people's understanding of what they like should be aligned with the understanding of what the game is offering and how the game is designed. Now, this requires breaking the entire sort of game development system.
When asked whether game designers should be worried about AI taking their jobs, Kusha said no. He believes it's the human component that still sparks the creativity that AI can more quickly generate for more players around the world. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
And you can get highlights from the week's news in Europe and China direct to your inbox from CGTN's Storyboard email newsletters. Sign up at europe.cgtn.com/newsletter.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. After oil, what next? OPEC Plus countries meet in Vienna to talk sustainability and energy transition.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities, reinvent, find new opportunities, discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference?
Brazen axe.
The difference is in the detail, the background,
Defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Moving to a green economy will not be cheap, and developing countries will need help. The conclusions of a major United Nations World Investment Report. Our other headlines: Europe looks to loosen restrictions on genetically modified food, saying new technology could produce more resilient crops, needing less pesticides.
At least 15 people have died in flooding and several others are missing as seasonal downpours lash China. Almost all of the Chongqing region is at risk of flooding, while tens of thousands of people have already been moved from neighbouring Sichuan province. China's President Xi Jinping has called for greater efforts to protect people from extreme weather. Our correspondent Guo Tianxi is in Wenzhou in Chongqing.
As you can see, the rainstorm has already stopped and the flood is already receded. And where I am is called the Wuqiao community, one of the worst affected area in Wenzhou district in Chongqing municipality. And just about 50 meters away, there is a river called Wuqiao River, and it's a first-class tributary of the Yangtze River. And because of the huge rainstorm, it's surged. And also because this community is in a rather lower-lying area, so the stores alongside the roads were being flooded about 1 to 2 meters. But some of the store owners are coming back because of the water is retreating. And also they are taking their merchandise out to dry them out. The reason why the once evacuated residents can come back to this area is because this area is considered the orange level area, which means it's not very dangerous. And also the cleaning up work was completed today, and the electricity was restored this evening, so they're allowed to come back. And but other areas that are considered at the red level area, which means they're still very dangerous to be flooded again. Also, the electricity supply and water supply were not restored, and the cleanup will be completed in 2 days. Well, in the whole district, the government has already sent about 2,500 rescue workers to participate in the rescue. They're including firefighters, police officers, soldiers, and their main job right now is cleaning up, since the first round of the rescue is wrapping up because of the receding of the flood. But they're also very actively helping people to rebuild their field and building so that the residents can come back to their hometown and come back to normal life as soon as possible. And the whole area also have about 200 households collapsed, and about 11,000 personnel was relocated, and most of them are living with their relatives, and the rest of them are living in the hotels.
Ukraine and Russia have accused each other of planning attacks on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station. President Zelensky says Moscow is responsible for putting objects similar to explosives on the roofs of several power units at the site. Europe's biggest nuclear power station has been subject to months of shelling.
Meanwhile, Kyiv says it has pushed back Russian forces in parts of the Donetsk region that remain under Moscow's control. Our correspondent Stephanie Fried is in Dnipro.
Russia's main advisor to their atomic energy program, she has said that Ukraine is planning on sabotaging, exploding something, or exploding the plant or something at the plant. That's the Zaporizhzhia plant at Energodar, south of here, a few hundred kilometers south of here. Ukraine's military says, as you were saying, also President Zelensky, that Russia has planted explosives on 2 cores, which may not blow up the plant, may not cause a huge disaster, could just cause a leak. And at the same time that we're hearing these reports, Ukraine's health ministry is issuing advisories on this is what to do in case there is a radiation leak. Bottom line, again, from these same intelligence community sources, they're saying that they believe that if there is an advance on the part of Ukraine's army toward the Zaporizhzhia plant, that's a region Russia has controlled since last March, yes, things could escalate. Don't know which side, but let's listen to President Zelensky's very, very clear accusations.
Now we have information from our intelligence that the Russian military has placed objects similar to explosives on the roof of several power units on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. It's probable they need to stimulate an attack on the plant, or they could have some other kind of scenario. But in any case, the world sees, and cannot avoid seeing, that the only source of danger to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is Russia and no one else.
Moscow says Russian territories have come under fire from Ukrainian forces. Governors in the Kursk and Belgorod region, close to the border with Ukraine, have reported civilian injuries in a string of attacks that have damaged homes and a hospital. Let's talk to our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Dasha, Kyiv generally doesn't comment on any claims of cross-border attacks. What are the Russian governors saying?
Yes, indeed. We heard from the governor of Kursk and the governor of Belgorod region, both confirming that there have been the shelling coming from the Ukrainian side against the towns and villages in these Russian territories. Now, we understand from Roman Starovoy, the governor of the Kursk region, that the town of that the village of Tyotkina has come under fire, and there's been damage to a school as well as to a private house. Now, another attack has been taking place in the town of Valuki, that is in Belgorod region, which is also bordering Ukraine, where the shelling has been taking place for about an hour, and Grad MLRs have been used for that attack, according to the local authorities. We also understand that it is in the Belgorod region where some attacks against the Graivoron and Shebekin districts have been taking place over the course of the past days. And certainly these two regions have seen increased shelling in early June, when there were also the groups of saboteurs crossing into the Russian territory. Of course, there's been no confirmation from the Ukrainian side, but Moscow accuses Ukraine and their constant shelling of the civilian infrastructure of these Russian territories.
Dasha, the Kremlin has confirmed what it calls contact with Washington over the jailed Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. What more do we know?
Yes, indeed. The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has confirmed that there have been certain contacts between Moscow and Washington, but those contacts have to be kept in private, silently, and he said that was paramount for this nature of contacts between the states. He was also saying that there would be no further details at the moment, but the lawful right for consular contacts must be ensured by both sides, by Russia and by the United States. Now, of course, these comments are following the visit that has been granted to the U.S. ambassador to Russia, Lynn Tracy, when she visited Evan Gershkovich, a Wall Street Journal reporter, at the Lefortovo prison. Gershkovich is accused in Russia of espionage, but also there has been a contact between the Russian diplomats in the U.S. and a Russian national, Vladimir Dunayev, who has been extradited to the United States from South Korea on the cybercrime charges. So that's why there has been discussion whether the possibility of a swap is now being discussed.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow.
Sustainability and the green energy transition are dominating talks at the OPEC Plus meeting in Vienna. The group of major oil-producing countries, plus its 10 allies, led by Russia, are also discussing production cuts as global borrowing costs rise. The July meeting comes 2 days after Saudi Arabia and Moscow said they would extend the 1 million barrel a day cut into August. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Johannes Pleshberger, who's in Vienna. So, Johannes, what's been said about OPEC oil producers doing their bit to reduce carbon emissions?
Well, according to the world's largest oil producers, sustainability is not possible without oil. Here in the Austrian capital at the OPEC's two-day climate energy transition conference, the OPEC chief Al-Ghais said that according to him, the real meaning of sustainability is fulfilling the oil demand of current generations while taking care of the needs of future generations as well. But let's listen to what Al-Ghais said this morning at the opening conference, at the opening session.
Billions of people depend on our commodity, oil, for daily life. This is an inescapable reality that warrants respect. That is why OPEC pursues market stability. Of course, as an industry, We want to ensure that we have an emissions-free future. Harnessing technologies that can do this will be one of the predominant themes of this seminar.
Just a few days before the OPEC chief's remarks, the climate non-profit CDP criticized the entire oil and gas sector for not making any progress towards the climate goals as agreed at the 2015 Paris Accord.
And Johannes, the United Arab Emirates saying that the latest production cuts by Saudi Arabia and by Russia should be enough to help balance the oil market.
Well, it doesn't really seem that way, although after this latest production cut announcement, the oil price lifted a little. It then went back to around $75, $76 per barrel, which is still $15 lower than what many of these OPEC countries would need or would like to see in order to balance their budgets. And meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has declared that this was a necessary step to further cut production. And they also said that it shows unity between Saudi Arabia and Russia, despite many analysts observing disagreements among members of the bloc. And this latest cut by Saudi Arabia and Russia also tell us that the outlook for this year's oil demand is still very uncertain. There are concerns about the EU's and the US economy being weak, and also that China's rebound after COVID-19 restrictions is less robust than hoped.
Johannes, thank you very much. Our correspondent Johannes Fleshberger in Vienna.
The funerals have been held in the West Bank city of Jenin for 6 of the 12 Palestinians killed during Israel's assault on the refugee camp. Hundreds of people marched through the city streets just hours after Israel's military withdrew. More than 1,000 troops were deployed in an operation Israel says was aimed at destroying militant infrastructure and weapons. Our correspondent Noor Harazin is in Gaza.
Well, the Israeli forces evacuated the Jenin refugee camp after 2 days of this military operation. This morning, hundreds of Palestinians from Jenin refugee camp marched in the funeral of 6 of the people who were killed during this operation. If we're talking numbers, and according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, 12 people were killed. 4 of them are teenagers under the age of 18. More than 100 were injured, and from the Israeli side, the Israeli military said that 1 Israeli soldier was killed during this Israeli operation on Jenin. This morning, the Palestinian Prisoners Ministry issued a statement saying that more than 300 Palestinian men were arrested from the Jenin refugee camp during this Israeli operation. At the same time, this morning, the Jenin municipality said that more than 60% of Jenin's camp infrastructure was destroyed. So this means that hundreds of homes will be left without water and electricity for weeks until they manage to fix everything and everything can get back to normal in the Jenin refugee camp.
Netanyahu has said that Israel's extensive activity in Jenin is not, as he described it, a one-time operation. I mean, what are we expecting to happen next?
Well, yes, this is actually not the first operation on Jenin refugee camp. Actually, this is the second one in less than 2 weeks. So, yes, people here on the ground, Palestinians, do expect that more operations on the Jenin refugee camp will be in the upcoming months, maybe weeks. No one really knows. But, however, Jenin refugee camp is one of the camps that the Israeli military usually carry out military operations on it. At the same time, this operation has sparked anger between and among Palestinians here in the Gaza Strip and also in the West Bank. So many clashes erupted between Palestinian youth and Israeli forces in different towns and cities in the West Bank other than Jenin. Actually, here in the Gaza Strip and overnight on Wednesday, there were rockets fired from the Gaza Strip. The Israeli warplanes answered back by targeting several farms and sites in southern and also northern Gaza Strip. So, yes, we can say that the situation is calm for now. However, there is tension and everyone is expecting an Israeli escalation at any time.
The Chinese-American singer Coco Lee has died by suicide, her family have announced. Lee's sisters said the 48-year-old had long suffered from depression and died on Wednesday after spending 3 days in a coma in hospital. As well as releasing over 15 albums, Lee is also known as the voice of Hua Mulan in the Mandarin version of Disney's Mulan.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Kenya counts the cost of filling up the tank, with fuel price rises trickling down to passengers on public transport.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So into the attention of world leaders.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
And in these mountains, they recently finished building a power plant.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Public transport operators in Kenya say they may be forced to raise their fares after a significant rise in fuel prices.
It's a further blow to people who are already struggling with the cost of living crisis. Our correspondent Enoch Sekolia reports.
This is Apollo Muturi, a lorry driver based in Nairobi. He's stuck in the middle of a busy road in the Kenyan capital after his truck ran out of fuel. He has been forced to rush to a nearby fuel station to purchase some fuel.
I am the one driving and I have just run out of fuel right here. These are hard economic times.
He's managed to get some few liters of diesel to finish his trip. Muturi is alarmed by how running out of fuel along this busy highway nearly put his life in danger. This highway in the eastern part of Nairobi, called Outer Ring Road, has been listed as one of the most dangerous roads in Kenya. Motorists often drive at high speed along this highway.
You didn't see how I kept running? You know it's a highway, so you must hurry before you get hit.
Fuel prices in Kenya have hit a record high, with petrol now trading at $1.39, up from $1.29 per litre. The price of diesel stands at $1.28, rising from $1.19 per litre. The new fuel prices reflect the recently enacted Finance Bill of 2023 that doubled value-added tax on fuel products from 8% to 16%. The public transport sector is already feeling the pinch. Edwin Mukabana is the managing director of Kenya Bus Service Management Limited, a successor to the biggest and oldest public transport operator in the capital city. Despite the company having its own fuel pumps, Mukabana says rising fuel prices have hit the business hard.
But the fuel price has been increasing over a last period of about 2 to 3 years. That means that we have been absorbing all those costs because fuel forms about 35 to 40% of our operations cost in Kenya.
Mukabana says the center can no longer hold, and passing the burden to the commuters is the only way they can remain afloat.
It has become completely expensive. We still believe that there will be another increase come next month or this month, later on this month, because the dollar is still appreciating over the Kenya shilling. That means that now we are not able to meet the cost of operating. We have to do nothing else but to increase fares.
It has hit my pocket because I have now to dig deep. Because let's say I had budget for fare, I had budget for the fare for the whole month. Let's say 3,000. Yes. So now it has increased by even 3,500.
Motorcycle taxi rider Alex Musau says high fuel prices have made it difficult to provide for his family.
I have to spend 1,000.
Every day now I must spend $7 for me to get at most $5. That money is for food alone. It's not enough to pay rent or send money to your parents. We are just desperate here in Nairobi.
It's expected that the new prices will lead to more inflationary pressure and an increased cost of living as manufacturers of goods, transporters and other service providers pass on the higher fuel costs to consumers. Enoch Sikolia, CGTN, Nairobi.
South Korea says a reconnaissance satellite from the DPRK that fell into the sea last May had no real military use. The South Korean military announced the findings after retrieving the wreckage of the satellite, as well as parts of the rocket that crashed soon after takeoff. Last month, the DPRK made a rare public admission of the failed launch.
The world recorded its hottest day ever this week. The average global temperature on Monday reached 17 degrees Celsius, passing the 2016 record of 16.9. Scientists say it's the result of the naturally occurring El Nino weather event and the continuing release of carbon dioxide from human activity.
As one of the country's largest crayfish production bases, Xuyi County in eastern China is trying to boost the local economy by holding a crayfish festival.
Our correspondent Chen Tong met tourists who've travelled there to sample the food.
It's 9 p.m. and nightlife has just begun. This is one of the largest crayfish markets in Xuyi. It draws both local diners and tourists.
在家乡也吃，但没有xuyi的好吃。
味美，它的肉质很厚实，很鲜美，然后各种特色都有。我们光这一盘点了4种特色，上瘾，对，停不下来。
还有我们xuyi人其实从第一届龙虾节开始，我们就开始对小龙虾这个夜宵美食情有独钟了。
Every June, during the crayfish catching season, the small county of Xuyi celebrates its annual crayfish festival. This year marks the 23rd edition of this cherished tradition. This year's crayfish festival is scheduled to run until the end of August. It's estimated that many tons of crayfish will be consumed in Xuyi throughout the summer season.
Our correspondent Chen Tong reporting from Jiangsu province.
It's something rather different on the menu in the United States. The Independence Day holiday has been marked with a traditional hot dog eating contest. The competition in New York's Coney Island brought participants from around the country.
In the men's race, Joey Chestnut fell short of his world record of eating 76 hot dogs in 10 minutes, but scoffing 62 still secured him his 16th win. New York native Miki Sudo took the women's title by troughing 39.5 hot dogs.
The competition, which began in 1980, is broadcast live on the ESPN Sports Channel.
The headlines again. Moving to a green economy will not be cheap, and developing countries will need help. The conclusions of a major UN World Investment Report.
Our other headlines: Europe looks to loosen restrictions on genetically modified foods, saying new technology could produce more resilient crops needing less pesticides.
And at least 15 people dead as flooding hits China, and there's no sign of a let-up in the weather.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
There's more on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
And you can go to CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team here in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.